Okay, councillors, members of the public, I'd like to make a start. Good evening. I'm Councillor Paul Wilby. I'm the chairman of the Planning Committee, and I'm pleased to welcome you here to this meeting of the committee. I take this opportunity to advise you that if the fire alarm does sound, please remain seated, and members of Democratic Service will assess the situation and give further instruction on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Tonight's proceedings will be webcast by the council, but if anyone else is intending to record these proceedings, can you please let me know now? I ask this question not to stop you, but merely to ensure that members of the public in the room know this is taking place. I'd also just quickly like to advise members that when members of the public are speaking, we can make sure we do give them the bit of attention that they do need when they do have their 3 minutes. Stay off your mobile phones, please. Okay, so move.
Some of the emails we've received will be on our mobiles, and I might be looking at them. Just saying.
I've just been asked to brief that out. So, okay. So, item 1, apologies. We've received apologies for absence from Councillor Gooch and Councillor Jeffrey. Are there any other absences? Is Mr. Spooner joining us today? Or? Okay. Are there any substitute members? Okay. Thank you. Moving on to item 3, visiting members. I see Councillor Trubinski, you're here. You just want it's actually detailed. Take it you're here to talk on items 17, 18, 19, and 20. Okay, thank you, Councillor. Moving on to item 4 then. Is there any other visiting members? And we have a statement from the Mayor on the burial ground application as well, so that will be read out by the officer. Item 4, items withdrawn from the agenda. So there are no items recommended for withdrawal from the agenda. However, in view of the number of applications to be discussed and the need to address late representation from Kent County Council, it's proposed that the following applications roll over to the adjourned meeting of the 26th of March 2026. They are item 14, land at Old Ashford Road, Lenham. Item 15, land at Postley Road, Maidstone, Kent. Item 16, land adjacent to Eon Street, Hollandbourne, Kent. Item 17, land at Eastwood Road, Oldham, Maidstone. Is that agreed, councillors? Okay. Councillor Thompson.
Chair, could I just ask for clarification? Are you saying that it is because of late representation from Kent County Council applying to all 4 of these items?
That is correct, councillor.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, so all in favour? Okay, that's agreed. Apologies to any people that are here to speak on those items, but due to late, as I said, due to late representation, we've had to move them on. Okay, moving on then to item 6, urgent items.
Sorry, colleagues, there's an issue with acoustics, we know, in this room, but there is a problem with the
So I should just repeat again then, the items that have been adjourned to the next meeting are items 14, land at Old Ashford Road, Lenham. Item 15, land at Postley Road. Item 16, land adjacent to Ion Street, Hollandbourne. Item 17, land at Eastwood Road, Oldham. Are members of the public clear which ones are being rolled over? Okay, I should just give members of the public a chance to leave.
Sorry, can I just ask a question, Chairman? If we knew they were going to be deferred till the next round, fully understand that, But if members of the public had indicated they were going to attend, did we not let them know that these were being deferred?
So members of the public, if they're representative of parishes or the applicants, they have been let know. Some applicants do choose to turn up to ensure that we do adjourn. Otherwise, we could have refused the officer's recommendation. We could have moved on. Okay. No problem. Okay, moving on to item 6, urgent items. I intend to take the appeals list, which is being circulated separately, as an urgent item because it was inadvertently omitted from the agenda. I also intend to take all written and verbal updates as an urgent item, as they contain further information relating to the applications to be considered at the meeting. Is this agreed? Thank you. Moving on then, item 7, disclosures by members and officers. Is there any disclosures? Councillor Summerskill.
Relation to item 20, I understand it's Maidstone Borough Council land, or it was. I'm unsure, but reading the documents, it seems to be Headcorn Parish Council application. But it is land that I visited as part of my cabinet role in 2024 for a different purpose, but I don't think that affects my view of looking at this item.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, item 8, disclosures of lobbying. We still do have to go around, but just to make it very quick, I take it on both the polytunnel sites that all members have been lobbied. Okay, and then I'll go around just to check if you've been lobbied on any more. So, Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been lobbied on items 17, 18 and 19.
I've been lobbied on 17, 18 and 19.
17, 18 and 19.
17, 18, 19.
No, just 18 and 19, Chairman.
Councillor Harwood.
17, 18 and 19, I believe.
17, 18, 19.
I feel special, Mr. Chairman. 16, 17, 18 and 19.
I could trump you with that. 15, 17, 18 and 19.
I just say all. Okay. Moving on then. Item 9. I move that all items on the agenda be taken in public as proposed. Is that agreed? Okay. Item 10. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of February 2026 be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 11. There is no petitions this evening. So move on to item 12. Call upon Tony Ryan, Planning Applications Manager, Development Manager, to provide an update on the deferred items. To you, Mr. Ryan.
Yes, in terms of the reasons for deferral, we are in discussions with applicants and we hope to get the cases back, hopefully the next cycle. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on then, we delve into item 18. I call upon Will Fletcher to introduce the report for land at Horsham Lane, South Park Farm, Horsham Lane, Sutton Valence, Kent.
Thank you. So the application site tonight is located a short distance to the south of Chart Sutton and approximately 1.5 kilometres to the southwest of Sutton Valence village. The application is for the erection
Mr.
of...
Chairman. I do apologise. Could I request, given Councillor's remark earlier, that I ask the officer and Chairman to please speak a little more slowly so that everybody can hear what is being said. Thank you very much.
Noted, Councillor. Thank you.
Sure, apologies. So the application is for the erection of just over 11 hectares of polytunnels for the production of soft fruit. The application site itself is not within a landscape of local value. I'll just draw members' attention to the urgent update, which sets out more clearly what landscape character area the application site is within. It is immediately north of the Low Weald LLLV, which is to the south of Horsham Lane. So polytunnels are arranged with the following layout. So you can see it's sort of north to south, and the smaller section to the east portion of the site, and to the larger sections sort of contained within sort of the northern half and the southern half. So the committee report includes an assessment of the application against the landscape local value criteria. The landscape character assessments do note that this is a sensitive landscape. However, these documents are well over 10 years old now, and when they were produced, the landscape was as it appears before you. So this is from 2013, and this has now changed significantly with much more polytunnel and agricultural development more evident in the area. There are other sites in the area where the LPA has accepted that polytunnels are necessary for the purposes of agriculture, and given the employment and economic impacts, it is considered that the proposed polytunnels are necessary for the purposes of agriculture. So these are the polytunnels that are proposed. It's cozy or COSI style. See, so the hoop layout, 4.25 meters in height, 2 meter space between the rows of tunnels. So this is the legs. They are screwed into the earth with space underneath the tunnels. It's just a picture of the tunnels. Just taking some time to review some of the landscape. So this is to the sort of southwestern portion of Forsham Lane. Fourth, you can see just about there are polytunnels at this viewpoint. So you'll have to bear with me. So that viewpoint is standing roughly here. So you will see the views. So you can see on the image, there's the views of the polytunnel, the section of the polytunnels that are here. So you will see views of the tunnels in front of the tunnels that are here. And then you have the row of, I think it's poplar trees out to the east, road screen views. Tunnels that are here. Just another views from Forsham Lane. As noted in the urgent update, there are different heights and types of vegetation around Forsham Lane. So some of them are taller, some of them are shorter. Their intention is to allow the shorter hedgerows to grow to 4.5 meters in height to provide better screening, and there is proposed landscaping to block up the gaps that are present in the vegetation. Just for balance, the report does accept that the polytunnels are going to be visible, and it will take time for the landscaping to mature to be able to screen them fully. So this is Forsham Lane veering towards the east at the sort of southwestern point. So you can see some of the difference in the height, the vegetation. This is viewing north, so again, there's taller trees. And so this is where the smaller section will be more visible from, where the hedgerow is shorter. Apologies. And so you would see the smaller section of tunnels in this field to the front, and then this is a winter view. So these were taken yesterday, when the tunnels here would be more visible. When it's bloomed, there'd be more screening. And this is Green Lane viewing east. So this is further to the west. So there will be long distance views of the tunnels, but views do include views of existing tunnels, which are you can see just here in the distance. Here's Chart Road. So again, you would probably get long distance views here as well, but this is viewing over existing agricultural development. As noted in the urgent update, just so members are aware, because I know it's been raised, Floods and Water Control have not been consulted on this specific application. They have been consulted on the other application at Rectory Farm. They have contacted me this afternoon requesting that they review this application. They have been consulted, as I said, they have been consulting the Rectory Farm application, and they are satisfied with that one, subject to conditions relating to a surface water management scheme and a verification report. So we have imposed that condition on this application on the basis that the grassed areas on the edge and between the tunnels will be left as long grass to intercept the flows, to try and reduce the movement of the water. The grass in between the tunnels is allowed to grow up. And then water can move underneath the tunnel. And just so members are aware, that was also on the basis that the other application does have access to that reservoir, which this application does not. So it is a different circumstance. So moving on to the on-site habitat enhancer, the BNG, the on-site habitat enhancement and creation results in a decrease of BNG decrease. There is on-site enhancement. So the proposed hedgerow enhancements result in an increase of 13.28%, and then the enhancements to the stream on site result in an increase of 29%. There are off-site interventions are required. So some of the off-site BNG enhancements are included in the Forsham Lane site, sorry, the Rectory Farm site. Okay. So this includes mixed scrub habitats are proposed in the off-site Rectory Farm area. You can see detailed here on the site plan. So be scrub species such as hawthorn, blackthorn, wayfaring tree, hazelfield maple, and Golden rose, and aged plants. An area of woodland is also proposed at the southeastern corner of the site, along with areas of grassland. So these have been reviewed by KCC Ecology, and following their positive comments, judge that to be acceptable. So the officer recommendation is to approve the application. Committee report does include the visual impact assessments that we've made. So in terms of balance, it is acknowledged that the tunnels will be visible until the landscaping can mature to mitigate this. Whilst there is an application, whilst there is a landscape impact, the site is an agricultural field, and what is proposed is an economic agricultural use. So this is given weight in national and local planning policies. So detailed what we do have in terms of the landscape character impact the assessment that is now updated. So we're recommending approval based on the papers.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Okay, moving on to speakers. Councillor Trubinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief, as I know that you all had plenty of documentation on this one to digest already. It's a difficult one. I mean, there's no doubt that the view from the residences locally will be impacted both from the top and the bottom of the hill by the installation of polytunnels. And the number of objections received is an indication of that. I admit I've got a field of polytunnels opposite me, and actually they don't bother me at all. But I can understand how they would bother some people. But you'll hear a lot about the objection reasons next, I think. But on the other hand, I'm a great supporter of our farming community. Only today, I was passing a farm on the way to Tenterden, which had a large sign outside saying, "Save British Food," which is an indication of the position the farmers find themselves in now. They're under a lot of pressure and need to adopt modern methods of farming to compete with overseas producers. I'm already uncomfortable with the extent to which we rely upon overseas sources for much of our food. We've seen what kind of effect that a similar reliance has had on our energy supply only now, well, today, 15 to 20% increase in fuel. And that's not going to stop there, is it? We become hostage to market fluctuations, which are totally outside of our own control. We really do not want the same for our food supplies. You will all need to look at policy LPRCD5 and satisfy yourself that those conditions are met. And also, of course, that the public benefit is given the correct importance. I don't envy your task. I'm glad I'm not sitting on the committee tonight, but that's as much as I'm going to say for the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, councillor. Okay, Ms. Pearson.
Is that working? The proposal would cause considerable harm to the visual amenities of the countryside and the landscape character. This beautiful wheeled setting is already tarnished by 91 acres of polytunnels, and to expand this area with monotonous, shiny polythene sheeting and caging would cause significant cumulative harm. The character of the countryside would be changed by industrial farming of a disproportionate scale. These impacts outweigh any other stated benefits of the proposal. The scheme would be contrary to policies SP9, 14, 15 and QD4, which seek to protect rural character and appearance. There have been 5 large-scale polytunnel appeals in the last 5 years in England, and all 5 were dismissed by the inspectorate due to the harm to visual amenities and landscape character. One inspector notes that existing polytunnels constitute a negative feature and should not be taken as a precedent for future development, and adding more would sprawl across the landscape, exacerbating the harm already caused. The same is true in this case. The council's landscape character assessment notes the landscape is in good condition, with panoramic views and elevated landform contributing heavily to the sense of place. The landscape has a high sensitivity to change, and the guidelines are to conserve and avoid agricultural intensification. The proposal would go against these guidelines and harm the open character and views. Growing hedges high enough to shield the polytunnels would take at least 15 years and will never mitigate the impact for users of the public footpaths. The landscape impacts have not been properly assessed by a specialist consultant, with no LVIA submitted. The statements made in the applications downplay the negative landscape impacts. The proposal would be contrary to policy CD5, as it is neither proportionate nor necessary for the purposes of agriculture. The land can be farmed without polytunnels, and Charlton's will not cease to be profitable without them, with a £13 million profit in 2025. There is no professional heritage statement, which is necessary to appropriately assess the impacts to heritage assets. Neither is there a specialist flood risk assessment. To approve the application without LVIAs, heritage assessments or flood reports by qualified professionals would be remiss. Don't let Sutton Valence take the title of the largest mass of polytunnels in the UK. The scheme should be refused. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pearson. Councillor Killick for Chart Sutton Parish, please.
Good evening. This application, combined with Rectory Farm and the existing polytunnels, if it goes ahead, would total around 166 acres, which is over 100 football pitches of plastic. Yes, you did hear that correctly. 100 football pitches of plastic-covered polytunnels on an escarpment that NBC is trying to bring down into the Kent Downs National Landscape. This development poses a serious risk of flooding. Polytunnels are notorious for surface water runoff as they form large impermeable areas. Flow Consulting Engineers' flood report, commissioned by residents, shows surface water runoff could be up to 26 times greater than natural greenfield rates, and feels the mitigation measures do not go far enough to ensure there is no risk to local homes. The applicant has not submitted an assessment by a professional flood risk specialist. They maintain that there will be no change in runoff rates, but history shows Forsham Lane homes flooded in 2011 after polytunnels were installed at Coombe Farm. Devil's Den also historical flooding issues, and the water courses from both this and Rectory Farm sites would funnel down to this settlement. The information provided by the applicant is not enough to be certain flooding will not occur now or with the unpredictable climate change. This breaches NPPF guidelines. Whilst this site is seemingly very rural setting, it is seen from no less than 3 Grade 2 listed properties. Plus, it will also impact the view from the Sutton Valence Conservation Area. The proposal will be harmful impact on the setting of heritage assets, yet there is no heritage statement by a qualified professional to adequately assess the levels of harm. Maidstone Borough Council prides itself on its biodiversity strategy. Wildlife has already been pushed out of Park Farm, now a barren industrial landscape. Proof has been submitted showing badgers, sets and badgers activity used in the land. If this goes ahead, they will be hemmed in on 3 sides. Policy LPCD5 asks for a programme of maintenance and enhancement of existing field margins. There are no field margins in 3 of the 4 fields. In conclusion, as this application surely breaches policies LPR SP 9 and 15, Chart Sutton Parish Council are asking this committee to reject this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Okay, Councillor for Sutton Valence Parish Council.
Do I need to push? Oh, okay. Thank you. Sutton Valence Parish Council would urge the committee to overturn the planning officer's recommendation on this application, given the harm that it will cause. Now, I would stress that the points I want to make on harm in this application apply equally to the separate individual application made by the same applicant that is next on the agenda. But I also have additional points to make relevant to that application when we get to it. So first, I'd like to comment on harm to the landscape. The planning officer's report to the committee acknowledges that the site, landscape site is in the Greensands landscape character area, yet it is suggested that because polytunnels already exist as part of the farm holdings here, that more are therefore acceptable. Now, this is simply a death by 1,000 cuts argument. And crucially, as you know, the applicant also has the second application for their fields to the northeast of those in this application, and there is a clear risk that where there's an insufficient consideration of the cumulative impact of each individual application, the council could be perceived as engaging in salami slicing. I refer here to the High Court principle in R versus North Norfolk District Council that a competent authority cannot screen out cumulative effects by considering parts of a single coherent scheme in isolation, and which in this case risks circumventing a full assessment of the cumulative sea of plastic that would overwhelm this historic iconic landscape. The fact that there are 2 parish councils here tonight also shows the unprecedented combined scale and spread of the existing and further proposed polytunnels across the landscape here. And as I personally understand it, and has already been mentioned, making it one of the largest potentially in England, given which is particularly concerning given the sensitivity of the location in this case. The committee report identifies non-objecting consultees, but only refers to the Council for the Protection of Rural England as having made comments without highlighting the fact what is in fact a clear objection on their part to this application on the basis of damage to landscape. Secondly, on landscape harm, there's also a concerning contradiction in the council's own policy. The Maidstone Borough Council Cabinet voted to seek national landscape area protection for the Green Sands Ridge to protect, and I quote, its spectacular panoramic views. And in October 2025, it formally appealed to DEFRA for this area's national landscape protection. Maidstone Borough Council referred to this as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to secure our most treasured landscapes. The report to committee argues that because this designation isn't formal yet, the council has no duty to protect it. But it appears logically inconsistent for the council to value this landscape and its views from the Green Sands Ridge in one breath and to approve a development that fundamentally compromises it in another. I have other comments, particularly in relation to harm to heritage asset homes and the setting, as well as harm to residential amenity, that I'll cover in the second application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and we have Mr. Charlton for the applicant.
I'll take it that's on, is it? Yeah. Okay. Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Chair. I'm Sean Charlton from Charlton's. We are a fourth generation fruit farming business, farming in the Maidstone area for nearly 80 years. We grow apples, strawberries, raspberries and cherries on 600 hectares in Kent and Norfolk, supplying most of the leading supermarkets. We employ up to 2,000 people who all contribute to the local economy. I've been growing strawberries for 40 years. Today, all berries destined for supermarket sale have to be grown in polytunnels or glasshouses, whether grown in the UK or abroad. This is to meet the demand of continual supply of quality fruit all year round at competitive prices. We can only farm on land that is owned or rented, that is available and affordable, and has a continuous supply of water for irrigation. We have been farming in Charter Sutton for more than 20 years. The polytunnels are in effect individual semi-permanent structures linked together. They do not have a single permeable roof or floor, like, for example, a warehouse. The water runs off the whole length of the tunnel onto the floor, where due to the topography runs underneath the tunnels and is absorbed in the grass. We aim to collect as much runoff water as possible to store and use for irrigation. The tunnels are designed to provide the best possible growing conditions for the crop. This enhances the number of beneficial insects for pollination and predator insects for biological control, reducing the requirement for pesticides. The tunnels require no foundation, just legs that are inserted approximately ½ metre into the ground. There is less ground disturbance than would be if planting an orchard using stakes. The polythene covering the tunnels leaves approximately 30 centimetres clearance above the ground, which allows free movement of wildlife through the tunnels. We have followed Maidstone Borough Council policy LPRCD5, which provides support for new agricultural buildings and structures, provided certain criteria is met. This includes the development being proportionate, necessary for agriculture, acceptable impact on the amenity of existing residents, water runoff control, seasonal management of the tunnels, enhancement of existing field margins, and encouraging biodiversity. We believe that this application achieves that. We use specialist ecologists who also cover great crested newts and badgers and have achieved an overall 29% enhancement on BNG. The development is in an agricultural landscape. All of the existing landscape features will be retained and enhanced and managed into the future. And only 20% of the total land area of Moat Farm, as the land at Forsham Lane, is being covered. We are farmers trying to farm.
Thank you. Don't believe we have a ward member. So councillor Harwood, you did indicate to talk first.
Thank you, Chairman. Please can the case officer put the two photographs up, the time-lapse photographs of 10 years difference up until 2025, please. I mean, if there's an issue, I'll just carry on and okay. Right, so we've got 2013. If we move on to 2025, right, we can see the change to that landscape, and that's not very long. It's just over 10 years. And if you were to pan out, you would see a similar picture of polytunnels and Cravo greenhouses as far as Green Lane in the east, right to the boundary of Maidstone Borough, right through East Sutton, going through Oakham and Knoll Hill. And it is beginning to reach the point where the traditional Kent countryside of a patchwork of different types of cropping is giving way to a domination of the landscape by this very intensive fruit farming. And everyone needs a chance, and we need a mix of agriculture, but it is no longer a mix. That is clearly a domination. And I think actually that particularly the Green Sand Ridge and now going down onto the Low Weald, it's facing a tipping point in terms of what our local landscape is going to be. And you only need to look at places like Almeria in southern Spain, of just seas of plastic, or Central Valley in California, where it's totally agri-industrial farming, and there is no countryside in the way that we would understand it. And I think the other issue I've got is, as I hear the case officer, I hear the applicant, and I hear others, but the problem is it's once bitten, twice shy, because we know from the other sites, drive down Oakham Hill where there used to be nice tall trees on the side, and they've all been cut down. Walk down Knoll Hill, and the big coppice trees and the hedges have gone, the hedgerow trees have gone. And when I hear about biodiversity net gain, the reality is lots and lots of mud. The vehicles plough the mud to the side. So therefore, if there is any woodland left, if there is any grassland left, it gets covered in mud, cleared off the paths. We know it made the Daily Mail and whatever about old coppice stalls being brush cut until it killed the stalls. We know about bluebells getting stripped to mush. These things are happening, and I do not believe that any of the biodiversity net gain that we have been sold is actually materialized on site, because I think the tidy site approach, which I think the supermarkets particularly like, is so extreme that there are no headlands, there are no field margins. This is not traditional farming, arable or whatever, where you can leave a headland and so on, because it is a different type of shop floor. And we know that the supermarkets drive a very hard bargain. And this is why I think we have just gone too far. And in terms of the biodiversity net gain issue, I suggest it's worse than we're not delivering a biodiversity net gain on these very intensively farmed, very intensively staffed sites. I think there is actually a sink effect in the wider countryside. And I think that you actually, the countryside changes. You do not see the wildlife that you did. I mean, we heard about badgers. I scraped 3 badgers off Oldcombe Hill recently where there's a fence has gone in close to the road, they couldn't get through and they all got run over. You know, that's the reality. And there's off-site impacts with things like the little tractors that drive down the roads, hurtling along the local lanes, you know, wanting sight lines to get very quickly from one site to the other leads to the impact of the trees being taken down from the roadsides. This is not a vision of the countryside that, frankly, I want. And I genuinely believe that in landscape terms, we can prove saturation of intensive fruit farming in terms of, and that is having a negative impact and dominating the local landscape. And I also, as I say, I challenge some of the BNG assumptions, but I'll leave it at that to hear what other people want to say. But this just hearing the application introduced does not tally at all with my lived experience of what I see. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I would just move members. Okay, the applicant, there's no evidence of him destroying bluebells and stuff like that. So I would ask people to disregard that comment because there's no factual thing of the applicant destroying anything like that, Councillor Harwood.
Well, if I may come back, that was at a site in Oldcombe. It was in the national media.
But on this application himself, okay, so we need to be careful about what we throw around. Okay, I've got Councillor Summerskill, then I'll come to Reardon and Russell.
Thank you, Chair. Just need some clarification about what Kent CCC Drainage have come up with, because I've come to this having studied the surface water concept of this site and I'm really concerned there's nothing. But you're telling me that nothing's been put forward, but Kent Drainage are going to be okay with it. That sounds strange. But looking at the documents that were on this, the stream at the bottom that goes down there, when you look at the surface water risk, not the flood risk, it floods over the side. It's a very small stream. In fact, KCC Ecology and one of their reports have got pictures of the land at the bottom and the size of the stream. I don't believe, from my water engineering experience of 40 years, that stream will take the runoff from these polytunnels without modification. And on the other side of that KCC Ecology document are figures 3, 4 and 5 depicting what's between the polytunnels. It's existing polytunnels, it's water with a little bit of green. And tracks, muddy tracks. That's what happens between them. And those muddy tracks facing downhill just move the surface water down faster and faster onto the highway, I presume, and then further down. If you could clarify what it was that you mentioned Kent Drainage came up with.
As I said, Kent Drainage weren't consulted on this specific application. It was the Rectory Farm application further to the north they were consulted on. The applicant did submit some additional details, which just clarifying that they were going to allow the grass between the tunnels to grow, should stop the water movement, and then some gravel filter drains to be provided downstream of the blocks of the polytunnels, and on that Rectory Farm application that they've got access to that reservoir. So on that basis, all that they have requested is that they submit a surface water management plan and a verification report. So what you're going to do and have you put it in. So that's what we've imposed on this one. So as I said, they have contacted me this afternoon that they want to review this in full. So at this point, I can't tell you exactly what they will say. They might just turn around and say they want the SUDS condition, which is quite simple for us to impose. But they could come back with something else. So at this point, I can't fully answer your question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you can.
Yes. Well, I've had to deal with polytunnel applications in Hunton and Linton Parish, and the drainage consultants there have put forward documents that Kent Drainage have gone through and rejected, claiming that 50% of the rain falling on polytunnels somehow goes sideways underneath and infiltrates the ground. So I'm so surprised that they haven't been asked to look at this beforehand. I know what they'll say when they look at it. There's no flood risk assessment. And there's, as one of the objectors said, there's no landscape viability assessment here. It really is no actual documents and nothing to really look at.
Thank you, Councillor Summersgill. Councillor Ridden. Councillor Ridden.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. As we're all aware, this is a beautiful landscape. And we as a planning committee are here. Part of our job is to safeguard our landscape. There's no way I think anyone can argue that this doesn't have a significant impact on the character and appearance of this area. I agree with Councillor Summersgill. I think there is flood risk and flooding issues. And I also think there would be an impact on habitat and harm to the many species that live in the area. So when you see the pictures, it is taking over the whole landscape. So I'm struggling with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ridden. Councillor Russell.
Thank you. So I've heard a vision of the
Sorry,
country,
Councillor Ridden, can you turn
Oh.
your microphone off, please?
Sorry.
a vision of the countryside that we want. I mean, that's a bit pompous, if I have to say. At the end of the day, this is somebody's farmland and they're farming and they're moving with the times and farming, and this is the way that farming is going. So I don't think, and I think we should refrain from comments that are saying a vision of the countryside that we want. We want it to look like this. It's not our land. The views are not, not ours to own per se. This is somebody else's industrial practice and farming that we are remarking. That's not to say that I am discounting the views, and I think the report makes cognizant points about the long range views. The other question I have is, even if we went to KCC Drainage and asked their advice or whatever, condition 9, because I've just looked at the conditions, has really controlled the drainage scheme. The development can't commence until a detailed sustainable water drainage scheme for the site has been submitted to and improved, but in writing by the local planning authority. It needs to demonstrate compliance with required technical standards, demonstrate the surface water generated includes mitigations for climate change impacts, including a critical 100-year storm. They've got all of those things there on 229. So I think even if we go there and come back, my worry is that we're just going to, how would that condition change? I don't think that condition would change or be able to be beefed up in any way. And I'd like to ask the officers' advice on that. And I think we were hearing that, I mean, ultimately, and from reading the papers, they will want the water to irrigate the crop. So, and with how expensive water is, it's in their interest to conserve the water and reuse it. So I would be interested, even if we went to KCC, asked their advice, and they came back, would condition 9 be able to be beefed up, or is that as strong as we could have with that?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Russell. Just putting Will back in, I'm a bit torn on this as well, the same as like Councillor Spinsky said, securing food sources is a major issue within our country as such. Obviously, it can be quite easily impacted by the changing climate in the world at the moment, and it is a changing time. I'm sure if we went back 200 years ago, people with farming would say that we're doing farming wrong in those fields as they are. The big thing for me is probably the drainage issue more than anything else, because obviously going to the site, the topography there is an issue, and there is no suds, and it's quite strange. I'd be more inclined if they weren't going anywhere near the stream with the polytunnels, to be honest. But that's just my personal point of view on that. But can you answer Councillor Russell's question, please?
Members have the right to request that up front, that information from the applicant.
Yeah, I mean, we must come at this with experience, and we know that the surface water dynamic on other parts of the interface of the Green Sand Ridge with the low Weald has been changed by this type of intensive fruit farming. We know in the Oldcombe area, for example, there has been quite a significant change in surface water behaviour. And we know that the Environment Agency have actually funded some household defence in those areas. And this is a very significant area of polytunnels that we are adding to. And I really do think that we do need to defer for Kent County Council to provide appropriate advice, or for the applicant to discuss that advice with Kent County Council, because it will have an impact on householders and on individuals, but also an impact on the environment, because the streams in this area feed into the river belt, which has already got problems. It's a triple SI river and it is in poor condition. We cannot have lots and lots of silt. And the point around grass in the rows, go and look at any polytunnel site. There is no grass, it is mud. That's why the mud gets pushed off the haul roads into the adjoining areas. So it's just a reality that we face. And where you're creeping down onto the Wilding clays here, it becomes even more problematic. So I really do think we need this checked out. And yeah, I am surprised that we do not have it, frankly. And the point that you made, Chairman, about a sustainable drainage scheme, it seems obvious to me that you do need swales and you need attenuation, because apart from anything, you need to settle that mud out of the water before it goes into the stream and then goes into a triple SI.
And Councillor Harwood, Councillor Somerville.
Completely different point, but having dealt with in Linton with polytunnels not being taken down in the winter and having to be enforced, I'm puzzled by condition 6 wording. Being born in November, I don't think there's 31 days in November. The wording says the covering shall be in place between 1st of March and 31st November in any year. I think that should be October, because the bid in brackets afterwards is saying that covering installation can commence no earlier than 1st of February, i.e. a month before, and removal complete by the end of November, which I would suggest should be the 30th. So if you'd look at that item 6, whenever that comes through, unless somebody, Mr. Trump has changed the calendar again or something.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Somerville. As I've noted, Councillor Thompson, as I've noted the importance of this drainage scheme impacting on this application, I'm going to move that we defer it, and we get that drainage information. We need to actually make the correct decision on this application. Okay. Does anyone else want to add? So when the officer goes away, about items to look at. Somerville.
I do agree with Councillor Russell that probably condition 9 won't get changed even after we see that, but I would like to see the detail.
Okay. Councillor Ridden.
Chairman, could we, on the point that Councillor Summersgill was saying about the removal of the tunnels during the winter, could we have clarification on the dates and timings? Because as I understand it, currently they're only taken down for a much shorter period of time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ridden. And the comment about the swells, well, for the actual catching the silt. Anything else you want to add, Councillor Harwood?
Sorry, I think there's a bigger point in here. What I was concerned in reading both of these applications was they were very specific to the application themselves and to the site. And the point that was made by a number of the local residents about that cumulative impact and the domination issue was not addressed in a landscape scale way, because we cannot take this in isolation, because there are polytunnels to the west, there are a lot of polytunnels to the east. we need to look at this general area around the Green Sand Ridge stroke edge of the Low Weald and tackle it. And if we are told that, oh, we have to, our landscape character assessment 2012 is out of date, so therefore the world has moved, it's now all covered in polytunnels, well, then we need to update something because this application is in now.
So I take it you wanted to add a overall effect rather than assessment. Officer Councillor Thompson, Councillor Perry's been waiting very patient there.
Yes, I totally agree with the point about the cumulative effect. I think it's really, really important. And the view, I have to say, and that's a point made by Councillor Reardon earlier on, the Green Sand Ridge is incredibly important, I think, actually. I think it's more important than some parts of the OMB, actually, but that's my personal view. If you stand on the Green Sand Ridge, the views across the Low Weald, and I live in the Low Weald, are fantastic. And if you look from the other way, where I live, again, equally sensational. So I think that's very important. The other point is and again, Councillor Harwood mentioned this, the river belt, because I think the protection of the SSSI is incredibly important. It's suffering a lot for various reasons. And I used to live very close to the river belt, so it's something quite dear to my heart, actually. And I don't want that to be made even worse than it currently is, because it has got silted up. It's got all sorts of problems with it. And I think it's very important that's protected and not damaged. So that's something I'd like to be pursued. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. On the extending the point about domination, reducing the impact, deciding of all of the competing merits and potential goods, which from ward councillor, parish councillor, applicant and so forth have all been rehearsed. We can think about just how much the intensification might be were it to go to approval. I'm minded to draw attention to bullet point 5 under the campaign to protect rural England, point that draws attention to buffering. That could be part of the same consideration, please, and not just the proposal that they make, but the principle that they point to.
Okay, thank you. Capture that one, Phil. Bye. Councillor Russell, last comment.
As we go forward through this evening, I just take it as read that people have read their papers, because in condition 9, the sustainable surface water drainage scheme that has to be approved needs to demonstrate that silt and pollutants resulting from the site use can be adequately managed to ensure there is no pollution risk to receiving waters. So I'm just cognizant that it's fine that we defer, but I'm taking it as read that everyone's read the papers, read the suggested conditions, because some of the things are actually in the conditions.
I think the issue some councillors have is, as we've had in the past, having a condition, but then the scheme that comes forward may not be actually adequate, or we deem it adequate to go with it. So I think that's what the councillors want to come back. Okay, so they're going to move to defer. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. All in favour of deferral? Those against? Okay, all in favour of deferral? Those against? Those abstaining? Councillor Perry, did you vote for deferral? Deferral, okay. That's okay. Thank you, Councillor. Okay. Right. Thank you for that. Moving on to item 19. Will?
Chair, Councillor Spooner needs to come in.
Oh, Councillor Spooner, if you wish to take your seat. And then while you're doing that, I have to get your disclosures of lobbying.
Apologies for being unavoidably detained, Mr. Chairman.
We I mean, just, have you been lobbied on any items on the agenda?
Yeah, items, are we? No, no, 16, 17, 18, 19 and 20.
And do you have any disclosures? Any disclosures?
No.
Could I just beg your indulgence again, Mr. Chairman, that I remind all speakers to speak at a good pace and facing towards their microphone so that everybody can be heard in the room. Thank you.
Okay. Right. I call upon Will Fletcher to introduce the item 19, land Rectory Farm, Rectory Lane.
Thank you. So this application is at Rectory Farm, again, short distance to the south of Sutton and about a kilometre and a half southwest of Sutton Valence Village. So the proposal is for just under 11.5 hectares of polytunnels again in the site location in front of you. So a lot of the same issues again. I'll just draw members' attention to the urgent update, which better clarifies the setting of the application site in relation to the landscape characters and the landscape of local value. A portion of the application site is within the landscape of local value. I think it's detailed in the urgent update. A portion of the polytunnels are within the LLV. So again, we have the arrangement of the polytunnels in front of you here. Just north to south layout. There has been some changes. A portion of the tunnels have been removed from Sparks Hall. There is now proposed landscaping in that location. So it's the same style of tunnels again, the round top with a 2 metre gap in between them. Again, it's the same tunnels. So just reviewing some of the sites. So this is on the corner of Rectory Lane. So this is where it's most open. You can see view across the landscape. This is viewing north. So there are polytunnels in the distance here. This is, sorry, this is from 2020 feet, but you can see that this is the more exposed view of the site when you're approaching the corner of Horsham Lane, and it is more open, so the tunnels will be most exposed at this location. This is from February 2026, so when the vegetation is reduced, just for balance. In the summer, it's grown, it does better screen the polytunnels. So our views, vegetation does screen it to an extent. And this is Rectory Lane. So this is the reservoir that's on site. You can see views of the polytunnels. The polytunnels will be located sort of in this area. So in this case, flood and water control have been consulted and have not raised any objections subject to the Sustainable Service Water Management Plan condition that's in the committee report and the verification report. So I'll just point out the applicant is incentivized to retain as much water as possible on site. They have an objection on the basis they do have this reservoir, which can take some water from runoff from the tunnels. And it is used, this is drained over the growing season to feed the plants. So we have a BNG plan here. So includes enhancements to the hedgerows around the north. There's enhancements to the line of trees at T18, so it's also again to the north. And there's other enhancements throughout the site. Just so members are aware, this section has now been removed and is now replaced by additional landscaping. That's not included as part of the BNG calculation, but the ecology have been consulted and they found that the BNG figures are acceptable. So again, through the other application, in terms of balance, it is acknowledged that the tunnels will be visible. It will take time for landscaping to mature and provide better screening. There's Economic issues is an agricultural use, an agricultural field. The tunnels are temporary structures and they are uncovered during portions of the year. It is acknowledged that it is uncertain how long they will be remaining in the landscape for, though. So on balance, it's recommended that the application be approved as per the papers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Will. We have Councillor Trubinsky again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I won't bore you, but basically what I've said on the previous application applies to this one as well. Save you a bit of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay. So, Mr. Turnbull.
All working? Excellent. Right. A crucial aspect that's being overlooked is the cumulative impact of these applications with existing polytunnels. The disproportionate scale of the aggregated industrial farming would obliterate greenery and wildlife in this protected area, causing harm to the landscape character and breaching policy CD5 and SP9. The application assumes that because polytunnels already exist, that more are acceptable without any consideration of the concentration. Thankfully, the planning inspectorate take the opposite opinion. Within the last 5 years, 100% of their refusals have gone to appeal and they were upheld by the inspectors. Some of their words are that the polytunnels constitute a negative feature on the landscape. They should not be taken as a precedent for future development, and the mass proposed would perceptively push the landscape towards a more industrial farming character. Part of the site for this application falls within the Green Sandell LV, and SP9 policy states that the distinctive landscape character will be conserved and enhanced as a landscape of local value. The landscape character assessment considers the site good condition with high sensitivity and therefore awards its highest category of conserve. There's no compelling justification for this development, and these land designations exist to provide protection in these cases of aggregate developments. For such developments, we should use lands of lower designation outside LLVs, such as brownfield sites. I think this lack of consideration is also reflected in the fact that there's no LVIA prepared by a qualified professional, as called for in policy SP14. There's also a statutory duty to preserve the settings of listed buildings and heritage assets. Considerable harm would be inflicted upon the settings of multiple listed buildings adjacent to the site through the introduction of modern large-scale materials in the setting of 15th century dwellings, noise of industrial farming disturbing the tranquility, views to, from and between these assets being destroyed. Historic England recommends cases involving multiple assets require a more detailed assessment. This application does not include a heritage statement by a qualified heritage expert. NPPF planning practice guidelines state public benefits should flow from the proposed development. They should be the benefit to the public at large and not just the private benefit. Beyond the profit for one individual, what real benefit is there? Yes, there are some seasonal workers, but sadly paid so little, living on this site, their net contribution is negligible. The mitigation measures of growing hedges is inadequate compared to the scale of the development. The applicant doesn't even own the hedges to the north, which they claim they will grow to 4 meters, and any new ones would take 15 years to mature. To the south, hedges would need to be considerably higher than the polytunnels to provide adequate screening due to the topography of the land. We strongly feel there's a lack of due consideration given the potential harm to heritage assets and landscape character, and we hope this application is refused. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Killick.
So, okay. As you can see from the aerial view in front of you, the combined with existing polytunnels that is planned will cover over 2/3 of the land shown in the photo. This is cumulative industrial scale farming that is disappropriate and would inflict lasting harm on the landscape character and beauty of the open countryside. Mason recently rejected a small single-storey rear extension to Lakeview Barn on Rectory Lane, close to the site, with a subsequent appeal inspector citing that it would introduce an unsympathetic and discordant element and cause unacceptable harm to the character and appearance of the LLV. So I'm puzzled how this planning committee can seriously consider 28 acres of plastic structures taller than the small extension to this valued rural setting. Flooding. There has again been no professional flood risk assessment to back up claims that surface water runoff will remain unchanged. A professional flood risk consultant hired by residents' opinion is that the applicant has not provided enough information to provide certainty that flooding will not occur. And to be fair, this reservoir that's existing is 4 metres approximately above ground level, and I fail to see how any runoff can fill that reservoir. Surface water runoff is a known flood risk, particularly on slopes and heavy soils, such as the clay found in this area. There is a 50-metre drop in this escarpment, and not all the levels on the site fall towards the pond, not the reservoir, the pond. Therefore, the pond will not capture the surface water that flows from the new streams, especially with the heavier downpours of rain at any time of the year due to our changing climate. Residential amenities. The proposed development is too close to homes on Forsham and Rectory Lanes and will cause harm to the residential amenities, contrary to the NPPF and policy LPRCD5. Shouts of the workers and vehicles are already clearly heard on these lanes. With the proposal's location being much closer to the dwellings, residents will be able to hear the noise in their bedrooms when picking starts at 3 a.m. Plus, noise of loose plastic generated by high winds. The applicant has declined to supply a requested noise assessment. The chemicals involved in pesticide spraying have been linked to cancer. Also, dust generated by dried tracks will make it unpleasant for the residents to use their gardens or even hang out washing. In summary, because of the above, Chart Sutton Parish Council strongly requests the committee to reject this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor for Sutton Valence.
Thank you again. Once again, I urge on behalf of Sutton Valence Parish Council that the planning officer's recommendation in respect of this application be overturned, given the harm this development will cause. I've already spoken to, in relation to the previous application, about the harm to the landscape, and in particular the importance of the High Court principle of the duty upon a competent authority to consider the cumulative impact of individual applications and not screen these out by considering each in isolation when they clearly form part of a single coherent scheme. I've also spoken of the logically inconsistent position of the council if it seeks national landscape protection for the spectacular panoramic views of this area, yet approves development that impairs that landscape. I want to turn now to 2 additional harms that are relevant to both applications, but have a particular resonance to this application. First, harm to heritage assets and their setting. The report to committee suggests this application is acceptable given less than substantial harm to the setting of 6 listed buildings. Now, I, however, read this as an acknowledgement that harm exists. The planning officer's report to committee is uncertain how long these polytunnels will remain in place, but considers that a 50-metre gap and a hedge is sufficient mitigation of harm. Under the National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 212, it's necessary when considering the impact of a proposed development on any designated heritage asset to give, and I quote, great weight to conservation. This is irrespective of whether any potential harm amounts to substantial harm, to total loss, or less than substantial harm to its significance. A commercial benefit from an application does not automatically override the long-term visual scarring of this development to these heritage properties and to their iconic setting. Second, harm to residential amenity and flooding. Concerns about wind noise on the polytunnels and from the drumming of rain are, as I see it, played down in the report to committee as being more of a winter issue when the polythene will be rolled up. This overlooks the year-round prevailing winds and the more common experience of summer rains taking the form these days of sudden deluges, which when falling on 11 hectares of plastic, some 50 metres, in some cases 50 metres from homes, will be a considerable and, in my view, intolerable noise. On flooding, we cannot rely on future verification reports. Forsham Lane already suffers from repeated flooding. Adding areas of impermeable plastic sheeting will inevitably accelerate water runoff into an already failing system. Relying on conditions to fix a drainage problem is a gamble this committee should not, in my opinion, take. Kent County Council's own standing advice on polytunnels and flooding acknowledges the risks. It says that polytunnels may be substantial in size and create large impermeable areas. This means that less rainfall is absorbed by the ground compared to natural undeveloped conditions, potentially leading to a greater volume of runoff entering watercourses or flowing overland to adjacent areas. This application is just above and follows the line.
You've gone over the 3 minutes. Can I ask you to wrap up your?
Yeah, I have just finished. It follows the line of Forsham Lane, where flooding issues affecting residents have been at their greatest in the past years. This application will only accentuate those problems. So my conclusion is that the planning balance here is skewed, prioritises commercial expansion, that I would add is working against nature rather than with it, over a duty to protect important heritage assets and a highly sensitive landscape. So please do not permit a creeping insidious spread of plastic on this sensitive location and refuse this application.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Charlton, again for the applicant.
Again, some of this will be repetitive, but there's some new stuff. Hi, so Sean Charlton from Charlton's. Just like to emphasise, we are a 4th generation fruit farming business, farming in the Maidstone area for 80 years, growing the apples, strawberries, raspberries, cherries on 600 hectares. Of the 600 hectares, 140 are tunnels, which is less than 25%. The rest are orchards, reservoirs, woods, buildings, etc. We're employing up to 2,000 people that all contribute to the local economy. I said I've been growing strawberries for 40 years. 40 years ago, they were grown in the ground, Darling Buds and Made style. The season was 6 weeks, and we were much more reliant on imported fruit. Now the season is more than 6 months, less air miles, etc. How important is that? Today, all berries destined for supermarket sale have to be grown in polytunnels or glass houses, whether grown in the UK or abroad. It's not our choice. This is to meet the continual demand of continual supply of quality fruit all year round at competitive prices. We can only farm on land that is owned or rented, that is available and affordable, and has a continuous supply of water for irrigation. Where else are we supposed to grow this fruit? The Green Sand Ridge has been a farming landscape for well over 100 years. We've been farming in Charlton Sutton for more than 20 years. The polytunnels that run off water are individual semi-permanent structures linked together. They do not have an impermeable roof like a warehouse. The rainwater does run off the sides of the tunnel. Because of the topography of the ground, because it's not dead flat or level, the water does run underneath the tunnels and is absorbed in the grass. I get it. We have existing tunnels. I've said that 140 hectares. Some of those tunnels do not have any grass. These 2 applications have grass underneath the tunnels because they're part of the BNG calculations. They will have grass under there. We aim to collect as much runoff water as possible to store and use for irrigation. We have submitted a flood risk assessment. We also do have a site meeting with KCC Floodwater Management team that has been agreed today on both sites on the 7th of April. We have followed Maidstone Borough Council policy LPRCD5, which provides support for new agricultural buildings and structures provided certain criteria is met. This includes, quote, the development being proportionate, necessary for agriculture, acceptable impact on the amenity of existing residents, water runoff control, seasonal management of the tunnels, enhancement of existing field margins and encouraging biodiversity. We believe that this application achieves that, 100%. We use specialist ecologists who also cover the Great Crested Newts and Badgers, and we have achieved an overall 29% enhancement on B&G. Are we saying their findings are not credible? If not, who do we use for this sort of stuff? KCC ecologists have agreed with our ecologists. All of the existing landscape features will be retained and enhanced and managed into the future. Due to screening and B&G, only 50% of the total land area of Rectory Farm will be used for tunnels. We are farmers, we are trying to farm. Are Maidstone Borough Council supportive of UK farming and UK produce? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, obviously much the same as the last one. Does anyone wish to go? Councillor Summerskill.
Okay, I don't want to major on the flood risk. My assessment is the flood risk provided was inadequate. There's no author named with no qualifications. I wouldn't expect to have passed something like that in my professional body. Anyway, I would like to look at the landscape views. I've walked the footpaths in this area, and the views from, especially from the Greensand Way, are quite iconic. They are all along the Greensand Way, and we have a mile of polytunnels at Rankins Farm, which just stick out when you look at it from the Greensand Way. But here we've got a footpath that goes across and through polytunnels. So we're expecting people who walked across a field before to walk between two lines of plastic, which may have grass or may have soil between them. I believe this is deleterious to the enjoyment of the countryside by people. Thank you.
Yes, Harwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the problem I'm facing is this point around my experience of other sites and the impact of the vehicles, the amount of mud, just the very intensive maintenance and management that does have an impact beyond the farm gate. I mean, if not just the vehicles, the noise, the itinerant worker settlements and so on, it is a really impactful land use. I think that's the concern the residents have. And those photographs, those aerial photographs showing the degree of change within this landscape within a decade is immense and huge. And the planning system in England is pretty much predicated upon protection of the countryside. That's essentially what it's there to do. And I cannot feel that we have failed to some degree in that we have landscape character assessments saying we have a landscape of high sensitivity, and then we see the photograph of the change which we've allowed in that 10 years. And we cannot just look in isolation at a few fields. This is that cumulative impact along the whole Greensand Ridge heading to the east and the west. And it's not all this applicant. There's many other land users with a similar approach. And this point around our countryside being at a tipping point, are we just going to allow more and more and more polytunnels so we do become like Almeria in Spain? So there is not a field, a field that's pasture, a field that's arable, that because we're in the southeast of England, we've got a lot of sunshine, we've got south facing slopes. Of course, these are really high value products. A truck full of strawberries sold through supermarkets sells for a lot of money. So therefore, of course, it outcompetes, winter wheat or sheep or whatever else is going on there. And I just think we've got a slippery slope that we have to do a balancing act, and the balance is going too far in favour of the industrial farming. It's having an impact beyond the farm gate into the community and into the wider landscape, and that we as a borough council have a duty and a responsibility to protect it. And I therefore think that we should refuse this application on the cumulative impact of intensive fruit farming and the domination of the wider landscape and its impact upon the character of the countryside. And I'll leave officers to look at the kind of detail in terms of policy, but I think it's an issue about the character of the countryside, and that's in terms of views, in terms of wildlife, in terms of the countryside belongs to us all. It's not all down to a landowner or a land manager. We part of Britain is a beautiful countryside, and we need to retain that.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. Well, I agree with that sentiment. I kind of wish you'd put that sentiment in the first one, and because I think we're going to send the applicant away on a deferral for it to come back for the same issue. So, Councillor Russell.
I do get all of those points, and I think some of the residents' points were very, very eloquently made, and my mind is not yet set on some of the view things that we're talking about. But just kick the debate off further, all of this land is somebody's workplace. So I do understand that we all have particular views on it, but it is somebody's workplace. And so who goes into all of our workplaces where we work and tells us what we, can and can't do in our working day with our own property or businesses that we own? No, I don't like it when we stray into that territory. I think we need to confine ourselves to material planning considerations, things that are on the paper, things that the residents have said, things that have been submitted by the applicant. I don't think we should be wide-ranging our views on somebody else's industry and somebody else's workplace. I don't think that's our place as a planning committee. I'm conscious, and I would ask everyone to think what's different from this to the other application that we've had, that we've deferred. So I think that's the issue I have with it. And fundamentally, we are the authority that has to place 1,200 plus houses a year across our borough. And we don't spend so much time, necessarily thinking of the long range views in some cases of those. We have just placed a care home on top of the Green Sand Bridge and given that permission in this sensitive area. And that was outside of all of the local plan and the settlement boundaries. So I actually ask for consistency in these matters, and I know that they're very different applications, but I find it strange when we go one way with something and one way with something else, and when it should all be evidence-based material planning considerations.
Thank you for those points, Councillor Russell. Councillor Perry, Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a lot of sympathy with what Councillor Harwood has said, because I think there is a cumulative effect here, and I think that it is critical. However, I also think the views and the harm done to the countryside is an issue. And I actually think we're in a situation where there is significant harm done from these developments. Now, that's one point, and I am very divided on this, because on the other side, I also am very, very conscious of the fact that the rural economy is very, very important. And I live in a rural area myself, and I think it's absolutely vital that we make sure that we have a good rural economy, one that has a really good economic future. And one of the issues I note from this is the issue of farming. I'm not a farmer myself, it's not my expertise, but nevertheless, I do see that what they're trying to do is to be more productive, to be more efficient. And yes, it is industrial farming, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because our whole economy has been based on the development of the industry and the Industrial Revolution itself. And farming is part of that as well. And so there are changes. There are always inevitably be changes in our countryside. If you go back 100 years, I'm sure it'd be very different. But then we're driving around in motor cars now, not in horses and cars. So there are differences. And I think the rural economy must not be forgotten in all this. And I think the farming community need everything they can be to help with that. And so I am very divided on this because I think there's two big issues. There's the harm to the countryside from these polytunnels. But on the other side, there's a very, very important point that we must not harm our economy, our rural economy, which we all depend on. Thank you.
Councillor Perry. Councillor Riddon.
Thank you, Chairman. I do feel very much for the applicant and the difficulty that farms and other industries are going through. However, I do feel quite strongly about this application and the cumulative effect. So I'm happy to second Councillor Harwood's proposal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Riddon. Yeah, I was just going to add, I kind of agree on the same lines of Councillor Russell and Councillor Perry. While there is the cumulative effects, and I appreciate you said about the other polytunnels already out there. Obviously, the applicant, I believe, has actually made an attempt to actually deal with some of the runoff issues on this site. To tell you the truth, obviously, this one's different to the other one. It has the reservoir. They've gone through the thing. I don't go wrong, walking through, but you are walking through someone's land. It's a right to walk, not a right to view. Unfortunately. Yeah, I'm probably more leaning towards where Councillor Russell and Perry are going on the side of the actual applicant on this, but we have a proposer and a seconder. Refusal. Do you want to add anything to your refusal and then I'll go to the vote?
No, it is that point around the cumulative impact and the domination of the landscape by intensive fruit farming and the harm to the functioning and character of the countryside.
So, Will, is there any policies that reference to so we can actually?
I'd just like to draw attention to the heritage issues as well, which seem to have been missed or overlooked, which some of the applicants, some of the residents mentioned. I mean, there are, in difference to the first application, which was in the open countryside, there are some significant and old buildings very close here. And our conservation officer has considered it's less than substantial harm to have polytunnels 50 metres away from these, I've forgotten which century houses they are, 15th century housing. It does strike me that it is more than less than substantial harm for that group of about 6 or 7 houses there to be that close.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Summersgill.
If I may, I think that's part of this kind of wider impact on the country, including the settlements are there. Yeah. And
can I just bring the officers back?
Yeah, but can I just add one thing very quickly? In that this area of countryside has a profoundly important history in an English context. It was this area around Chart Sutton and Sutton Valence. It was the manor of Leofwin Godwinson, the Earl of Kent, and then it was Simon de Montfort, of course, was in Sutton Valence Castle, and that was his estate. This is nationally important history.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Will, have you?
Yeah, so QD4 does state that in an appropriate circumstance, landscape visual impact should be submitted in an appropriate circumstance. So if members want to go down the refusal route, they could be on the basis of failure to demonstrate visual harm for the lack of submission of that document.
think we're going to need some more for that to be more robust.
No.
Sorry, Councillor, let me finish. For it to be more robust to stand up to, let's be honest, an appeal. Is there any more extra wording that you can add?
Yeah, it's because of the scale and location of the polytunnels, it is impossible to screen them in any meaningful way. Indeed, screening is definitely not wanted because it stops sunlight getting to the polytunnels. So there is no way that it can be screened or landscaped, and therefore it will have a dominating impact on long and short views from both from the Low Weald north into the Green Sand Ridge and from the Green Sand Ridge down onto the Low Weald. And it is introducing an alien and urbanizing feature basically of metal and polythene onto acres and acres. But it is that cumulative impact, and we really need to capture that. And we can have a narrative under a grounds for refusal, and this is where we really needed landscape professionals here because of the importance and significance. I'm surprised we didn't have a landscape manager here. I'm surprised we didn't have more input. We're just undertaking a landscape character assessment, and the area around the Green Sand Ridge and the Low Weald are an absolute focus of it, and yet we've not got that coverage. And you know, I think what I'm saying about that dominating impact and the harm to the countryside, we do have lots of policies that tackle that.
So just shorten that down to an actual thing. So it's the short and long-term visual impact on the countryside, views afar. It's the cumulative effect of the whole polytunnel system that's already there. Just add into it. Is that correct?
They're already there both on these farms, but also within the wider landscape. It is the cumulative impact across that whole of the scarp of the Green Sand Ridge in particular.
Okay, I remember it's clear on. So did you want to add anything as a seconder?
I just wanted to add the paragraphs in our notes that's on the previous objections and the grounds that they've stated.
On the previous one we deferred. So we didn't.
No, the previous objections, proposed developments would overwhelm and harm the surrounding landscape of local values, Green Sand Ridge and Low Weald and character areas. Proposal does not comply with local plan policy LPRSP 9 states that the distinctive landscape character of the Green Sand Ridge and the Low Weald will be conserved and enhanced as a landscape of local value. It's strengthening the points that Councillor Harwood's made.
Okay, thank you. I've just been advised that maybe we should take a little break, actually get that wording correct before we actually go to the vote. Okay. Councillor McGill, go on.
Lack of a heritage impact assessment.
Yeah, we've covered there.
Got that.
Yeah. So if we're going to be mindful to take a break, everyone can be back at in 10 minutes. Yeah. Okay, so the meeting is adjourned. Okay, councillors, members of the public. Okay, so back to item 19. We have our proposer, refusal, our seconder. The officer's just going to read out the reasons for refusal.
The proposal would result in significant visual harm to the Green Sand Ridge by way of introducing such a significant extent of polytunnels, which results in an alien and industrialising feature to the application site, resulting in significant visual harm to the immediate area and wider countryside. The cumulative impacts of the proposed and existing polytunnels results in a domination of industrialising features to the countryside, neighbouring Grade 2 listed buildings. There was a failure to demonstrate the impacts of the proposal through the submission of an LVIA. It is not assessed that the proposed landscape planting would mitigate the significant harm caused. The proposal fails to comply with policies SP9, QD4, SP14B, and NV1 and QD4, and would request delegated authority to tweak that as necessary.
Okay. Everyone happy? Okay, so I'm going to move to the vote. So all in favour of refusal? Okay. Those for? Well, those. Oh, damn it. Those against? Those abstaining? Yeah. Okay, so that's six in favour of refusal, 5 against, 1 abstaining. Okay, so that is refused. Okay. I would just give members of the public a chance if they do want to stay around or if you do want to leave. Okay. Thank you, members of the public, for being very patient tonight. Moving on then, item 20, landowners Redhill Stables, Lenham Road, Headcorn. I call upon Rachel Elliott, Case Mayor, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chairman. First, I draw your members' attention to the circulated urgent update. This details that the applicant provided updated ecological information at the start of the week. This includes further information relating to an updated ecological survey and to BNG. The report concludes that the site characteristics have not significantly changed since the earlier reports, and the updated walkover survey has confirmed that the site continues to provide suitable habitat to support great crested newts and reptiles. The report also confirmed that there is potential for breeding birds and reptiles. This information has been shared with KCC Ecology, and they are satisfied that additional information overcomes the earlier concerns, and subject to a suitable mitigation strategy, which could be conditioned if required, no objection is raised. As such, the recommendation set out at paragraph 7.06 has been amended to reflect this and removes the second reason for refusal. The application site relates to a parcel of land known as Redhill Stables. The site is to north-east of Headcorn along Lenham Road. The site is within the countryside as defined in the local plan. This aerial photograph shows the application site in here, bounded by trees along all boundaries. There is a historic sort of access point into the site, sort of here to the west. So this is a street view. This is where the access point was. Access point related to an authorised use of the site approximately 20 years ago. The site was then compulsorily purchased by Maidstone Borough Council. So Maidstone Borough Council currently do own the land. Looking along the road to the northeast, you can see the vegetation on the road and sort of mature trees. Looking in the other direction along Lenham Road, again, you can just sort of see the remnants of a wall there, the proposed access point approximately in there, and sort of the lower level hedging towards the southwest of the site. Internally within the site, these are taken from the applicant's updated ecological survey. This is sort of looking southeast across the site, looking northeast across the site. So the proposal itself is for the change of use of the land to a natural burial ground for people and pets. It would include a number of structures, including an octagonal open-sided shelter here, meeting rooms and cabins, toilets, and in the access from Lenham Road, approximately 55-metre length of roadway and a parking area. The applicant envisages approximately 50 to 100 burials a year and a maximum of 3 human burials a week. On average, they anticipate between 15 and 30 people to attend a day burial. This excludes any staff and funeral directors. These plans give a bit more detail on the ancillary buildings. So this is the floor plan of the cabin, the elevations of the cabin, the octagonal structure, the toilet block, and sort of some more details of the proposed access in here, the access track, and the proposed parking area. The application follows an earlier submission in 2022. That said application was refused on highway safety grounds. The application predominantly remains the same, but additional information has been submitted to overcome the earlier reason for refusal. Details of the additional information, mitigation measures and response is included at paragraphs 6.15 to 6.23 of the committee report. For the reasons set out in the report, KCC Highways objection remains and that unsatisfactory visibility displays are provided northwards from the site. So looking at the extract from the visibility displays, so this is displays towards the south. It's quite difficult to see, but there's sort of a red line here, which is the 120-metre displays, which are anticipated for the speed of the road. The 120-metre display is shown along this line to the northwards. The applicants are aware that they can't make that at all, so have shown this blue line, which is a reduced display. So the distance between sort of the 120-metre display and the one here is approximately 26 metres. But what it doesn't take into account is land ownership and all the planting you saw in the first photo. So this area is heavily vegetated with trees. There's indications of a number of the trees to be removed. So these shown here, 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 and here. These are all on land, apart from this one here, outside the control of the applicant. Given the land outside the applicant's ownership, existing planting and the road alignment, it is not considered possible for the applicant to overcome the substandard arrangement and the lack of visibility display, which as a consequence would be harmful to highway safety as advised by KCC Highways, and therefore the application is recommended for refusal for the reasons set out in paragraph 7.06 as amended by the urgent update. All other material considerations are considered acceptable as set out in the report and amended by the urgent update. Many thanks.
Okay, thank you. We have a statement from councillor Round. Read out.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a statement from Councillor Round, ward member. He's unable to attend because of mayoral engagement this evening, but would like to comment that this application is the outcome of years of work. The land owned by Maidstone Borough Council was offered to the community for a meaningful project. I engaged with the Parish Council and our sustainability group, then led by Penny Kemp, one of the founders and the first official leader of the Green Party, when called Secretary General. We consulted at length. We drafted several options of a wish list that we jointly drew up together. The community agreed with a natural burial ground. Penny and I worked this idea up. Sadly, Penny passed away and there is no natural burial ground in the area. Years have elapsed with the project being resurrected several times after previous planning refusals. The Parish Council have led this work. This will be a natural, ecological and environmental enhancement to the area. That its intention as well is to satisfy the need for such a service when other burial grounds, especially at churches, are fast being taken to capacity. There is no policy for burial grounds in NBC policies, but there should be. There's an environmental and economic need. It should also be recognised that there is an inevitability for such a need in rural countryside. The foundation of the recommendation generated by the KCC Concern for Highways is personally considered to be understandable if examining certain data, yet unrealistic when knowing reality. The access and exit will be fully supervised at funeral events, and traffic movements in nearby encampments generate considerably more movements and erratic standards of driving. The very nature of a funeral is based on slow, careful and measured activity in a serene manner. This will not be a public cemetery or like a crematorium with frequent visits and high numbers. A true appreciation of reality is needed for this application, and recognition of initiative and enterprise with environmental benefits should be applauded. We owe it to Penny Kemp, so please approve the application. Thank you.
Okay, councillor Trubinski.
Thank you, Chair, members. First, I hope everyone's familiar with this particular location. It's all very well looking at the pictures and the diagrams, but you need to go there. I drove there again this afternoon. I've been there a number of times on this particular subject. And there is already an entry of sorts, which has two rather large concrete blocks in it to dissuade people to enter. This is because it was actually used in the past as an entrance, and as far as I'm aware, there were never any accidents there. At the moment, the land is sitting there doing absolutely nothing. The idea of turning it into a natural burial ground is ideal. This form of burial is becoming more and more popular, and there are not enough sites at the moment. The objections raised by KCC Highways last time and this time, in my opinion, are just not enough to stop the application. And I would question their conclusions as well. As we've heard, they need 120 metres on either side of the entrance, and we're short of that requirement on one side only by just over 20. That still leaves 90 metres. And anyone who can't stop their car properly in 90 metres, quite frankly, doesn't deserve to be on the road. I'm sure it would be safe. There will also be little intensification of use, as they put it, and whatever there is, it won't be material. There will not be a queue of cars all the time waiting to go in and out, I'm sure. In addition, the mitigation measures they've advised, if you go to the site and you see what the mitigation can be done, you will see that, quite frankly, there would be no
Councillor Trubisky, your microphone keeps cutting in and out, so we're just going
Sorry.
to get that replaced.
Sorry, which bit will I go for? Yeah, I mean, the mitigation that will be in place will make it very easy for people to be seen for miles in both directions, quite frankly. Lastly, this would be a real benefit to all the residents of Maidstone, and I would support the application and urge this committee not to be held to ransom by KCC. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Sexton for Headcombe Parish Council. So it's just the button at the bottom with the little face.
Right, Chair and members of the committee, I'm speaking I'm speaking on behalf of Headcombe Parish Council in support of this application, which will provide a community asset and an important source of income for our parish. We recognise that officers have recommended refusal, citing highways and ecology objections. We would respectfully ask that members to use their prerogative based on your local knowledge and common sense judgment to consider whether either of these issues generally warrants refusal. When weighed against the significant benefits this proposal would deliver for the borough. This application would provide a much needed burial ground serving communities across the Greater Maidstone area. Burial capacity is increasingly constrained. Natural burial is increasingly popular, and many families are currently required to travel outside the borough to lay loved ones to rest. Providing a local burial ground would allow families in this part of the borough to remain close to their communities. It would also reduce long-distance journeys to alternatives further afield. This is a clear public benefit that should be given substantial weight. Turning briefly to highways, the proposal involves an existing access, not the creation of a new one. Funerals would take place a maximum of 2 or 3 times a week, generating very limited and predictable vehicle movements. Our specialist operator confirms that natural burials simply involve very few vehicles, and you could, of course, govern this by condition. Where there are concerns, simple and proportionate measures such as signage could easily address highway safely, and we do not believe the severe impact test is met. I would also like to address the ecology objection. Our professional ecologist has confirmed that the KCC request relates to an update of an earlier preliminary ecology appraisal, rather than the identification of any known ecological harm. This is guidance rather than a policy requirement, and the request is slightly more than is strictly needed. Despite this, we've gone ahead and commissioned an update to the ecology report. This should have been forwarded onto you all from the planning. I think you heard it, yeah? Right. The recent assessment confirms that the broad habitat on site remains unchanged. However, if more detailed checks are needed, these can easily be made prior to works commencing and are not a barrier to granting permission. Indeed, our ecologist has advised this is not an unusual situation and that securing updated ecology assessment by planning condition is entirely appropriate. Headcombe Parish Council would be very happy to accept such a condition. This would ensure the proper protection of wildlife without preventing delivery of a much needed community facility. In conclusion, this is a low intensity, sensitively designed proposal that would meet a clear borough-wide need, may provide major biodiversity uplift and reduce the need for longer journeys outside Maidstone. It can easily be made acceptable through.
Sorry, councillor, can I ask you to wrap up? You're almost at 4 minutes now. You've gone a minute over.
Oh, I was told this was 2 minutes, 36 seconds. Sorry. I've only got two lines to do. It can easily be made acceptable through proportionate and reasonable conditions. We therefore respectfully ask members to support the application. Sorry about that, but.
Okay, thank you. Ms Mapleson for the applicant.
Oh, is it already on? Yay! Hello, I'm Sian and I'm part of Gentle Endings Limited, but I have 11 years of experience in managing Kent Natural Burials. Kent Natural Burials was the first natural burial ground in Kent, established in 2008. Our historical data shows an average attendance of between 5 and 30 attendees per funeral, which supports our proposed parking facility and also the minimal increase in traffic. This is also acknowledged by the Association of Natural Burials, of which we are members. Moreover, during the planning of Sheppey Natural Burial Grounds, they came to us for our experience to find out, again, recommended parking spaces and sort of traffic, etc. Sorry, my mind's elsewhere. Additionally, it's important to note that we only carry out one burial a day, and normally 2 to 3 a week. Some weeks there might not be any. During the time at the moment, I'm seeing between 11 and 1 o'clock, the preferred times, meaning that cars will be attending and travelling to us during the off-peak times, further reducing potential traffic issues that you might have. I wanted to note that both our Dearton and Riverview Natural Burial Ground, owned by Kent Natural Burials, are located on country lanes with 60 mph speed limits, neither of which would currently the sightlines requirements would not actually happen at the moment. If you actually looked at it, they're close to bends on one side of the sightlines. So, but we have had no issues with any accidents or anything like that, touch wood. It's also important to note that natural burial grounds differ very diversely from crematoria, which conduct multiple services daily, with many more attendees requiring larger facilities. Our focus is on creating an intimate and supportive environment for families, often leading to smaller gatherings on site, followed by larger gatherings at an organised rate in local venues, say Headcombe, etc. And finally, nearly there. In keeping with our dedication to sustainability, we promote car sharing amongst our attendees to decrease traffic. Families also take comfort in the knowledge that our care for the natural burial grounds support biodiversity, alleviating the need for them to maintain the graves, resulting in fewer return visits. In conclusion, while we acknowledge that the required sightlines cannot be achieved, it is important to emphasise that these standards are discretionary and do not have to be religiously enforced. Given the modest use of the site, we believe that the resulting impact on highways and the sightline will be minimal and thus not lead to any significant transport issues. And then,
okay, yes, you could. Thank you.
this one.
Okay, Councillor Cleater.
My question was actually answered, which is, was the land Maidstone Borough Council's? That's all I was checking. I thought I'd misheard.
Okay. Before bringing you in, Councillor Howard, I'm going to say my little bit. I think this, in the briefing I already had, I'm quite all for these. I've tried to encourage Maidstone to do this for quite some time as the borough. This is a good way to secure land for future nature reserves and urban income. I was surprised I didn't bring this up with Richard Timms actually when we actually went over it. I find it odd that we, with display lines, for example, we're saying, well, that land is not in the ownership of said people. And I think time and time again, we've been told at this committee, that's a legal issue, not a planning issue. So from that side of it, and to be honest, as it's got an access, and I've been down that road many times to go to the fence and place up the road from it, to tell you the truth, I don't think there will be that many issues to go with it. And there's farm gates off each of them, and there's the traveller sites as well to go with it. And from the green side of it, to tell you the truth, we're not cremating people, we're not using energy. There's a few other issues I think Mike's going to bring up in a minute, but I think it's a positive, to tell you the truth. So that's just my opinion, and yeah, I would happily vote against the recommendation on the paper. Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chairman. Though I'm very supportive of the concept, I am also very aware that on objection from the Highway Authority, procedurally is a very high bar for a planning authority to ignore. We need to essentially have evidence that the safety concerns raised by the Highway Authority can be either overcome or are not actually relevant. And because it is a calculation, it is very difficult to disprove unless we had consultants who could crunch the numbers in a different way. So I do have some concerns. There are lots and lots of accesses, farm gates and other accesses to historic houses and so on country lanes that would not get support from the Highway Authority should they be a planning application now. But very often those sorts of accesses, it is not the same as a hearse and followers accessing or egressing that junction. And I am very cognizant of the traffic speeds reached on Lenham Road, and sadly, fairly recently, the fatality on the Lenham Road. So if I thought that everybody would drove to the speed of the road, but you drive along there and they don't. So I think that we are placing ourselves as a regulatory committee in some jeopardy if we ignore a clear objection from the Highway Authority without appropriate advice. Objections from the Highway Authority are few and far between. And when we actually have one, and they just follow the book, they just follow their guidance. And I just think that we're sticking our neck out a long way going against the statutory consultee on highway safety. So I think I will have to move the recommendation as per the paper that we refused, but only on grounds one, the highways ground. Thank you.
Does that have a seconder? Okay. Anyone else wish to speak? Go, Councillor Reardon.
Following your points, Chairman, and I absolutely take on board what Councillor Harwood has said. I think it's been a very well thought out application, and it's clearly a positive facility for the community. So I would like to approve it, but I don't want to we need to deal with the situation that Councillor Harwood has raised.
I'll bring some more people, and then Councillor Summersgill, then Thompson, and then Russell.
Thank you. As I mentioned right at the beginning, I visited this site for another purpose, to look at the biodiversity of the site, and it's a raised site, and the highway's raised. It comes over a small hill there. that concerned me for the purpose we were going, because like Staplehurst and other places, there's liable to be a band of limestone underneath the wheeled clay, which caused the topography change. But fortunately, when I looked at the papers earlier today, somebody had dug 2 trial pits in 2022 on the site and didn't find the limestone at a depth of 1 metre. So one concern I'd have about the suitability, given these sites have to have Environment Agency approval, was countered. On the ecology, I was pleased also to see this walkover survey carried out by somebody with the appropriate qualifications, and our urgent update with the chat with KCC Ecology all seems to be sorting everything there. I would note the previous survey found evidence of great crested newts in 2 of the ponds on the 2 corners of the site, and given that standard rules for Environment Agency for natural burial sites require no burials within 10 metres of any field drain or dry ditch, and not within 30 metres of any spring or water course, I'm assuming that there are no burials around the perimeter of this site. Yeah, I think that's the concern I would have with the requirements, but also somebody had also done a tier 1 risk assessment, I think in 2022 as well, which as I'm on the Marden Cemetery subgroup, I've had to do for hours extension, so I'm quite aware of what the rules are for these. So I had concerns before I saw the documentation today, and now those concerns have been allayed.
Yes, Thompson.
It is wonderful to note, Chairman, that we have a response from KCC Highways for a planning application. I have an unusual remark to put in Dear Diary this evening before I go to sleep. Actually, no, 2 parish councils agreed with each other earlier in the evening. Also, a red letter day. May I note, we are in the situation where, because the Office of Papers are for refusal, we don't have a scoping of what the conditions might look like if there were to be a recommendation for acceptance with conditions. And I've counted 19 paragraphs in the documents where I think that valid conditions might be volunteered. Councillors mentioned the 3 ponds that lie just outside the application area. That clearly is significant. Councillor Harwood's point about seeking some expert advice as to what mitigations or indeed possible refutation there might be, were there to be any. I think his point about highway safety clearly must be taken seriously. So I'd like to ask whether or not deferral for consideration of those items on a constructive basis is the question that we should be asking. Thank you.
I'll give it to the officer.
I think obviously it could be deferred to, if your members were minded to approve, to consider what conditions, or members could delegate that to officers. Obviously, as raised, there is a highways objection. It's on safety grounds. Members would have to provide rationale and reasoning why they would choose to depart from that if they were to move forward with any recommendation for approval.
Okay, does that answer your question, Councillor Thompson?
I'm not pretending to have sufficient insight into what technical process there might be to address the challenge that Councillor Harwood put. I think that we need to take it seriously. I'd like to know what it would be.
I think it is. They want that splay line. Yeah, I find it, no offence to KCC, but the amount of applications I've seen on worse entrances, shall I say, I'm a bit shocked that this one is one that have pinned their hat on, to tell you the truth. You know, there's many in my ward that have gone through, which, to tell you the truth, you think would have been refused, and they're not. Probably the same in your ward, Councillor Thompson. On the safety stuff, I think is it is an issue because obviously if there was an incident, obviously potentially we could be liable. I think that's what Councillor Harwood's trying to protect us from. I will let the officer come back in just to clarify that matter, and then I'll go to a few other people, and then we'll see about possibly whether it is worth deferring or which route we go down.
So in terms of, as Councillor Warby suggested, I don't think you're going to remove the objection from KCC. There is some unknown about the land ownership, which if you're looking at this plan here, so the red line essentially, the red line that's in the applicant's ownership or in NBC ownership and been served notice that the applicants have put as their red line is essentially this line around here. This is the back edge of the road. So all this area in between here is where you've got the landscaping. So all that area there is where essentially you need to see across. And this isn't a hollow through this, so this is all vegetated. So although there's the quoted that it doesn't meet it by 26 metres, in reality, there is very poor visibility along anything in this direction, given that landscaping. If you go back to the street view pictures. So this is looking through here. So essentially you've got a tree here, which would need to be removed to provide visibility displays, and anything along here looking in that direction. So actually in achieving those displays, it's very difficult, and actually I would suggest that the situation is probably slightly worse than even KCC are suggesting. They've quoted what is in the statement, but actually in reality on site it's, I think, very difficult to see that actually you'd have much of a visibility in that northward direction. There is obviously this land here which we're not sure who owns, so it could be that may be highway land. We have asked a question but not got a response. The applicants put forward that it was unknown at the time of the submission. There was, so it could be that maybe highway land, which maybe they have control to make it clear, to make a safe access if agreeable, but it could be in somebody else's ownership. So obviously creating the displays, I think, would be fairly impossible.
Yes, Russell.
To keep it short, I'll second Councillor Thompson's motion to defer so that we can get some decent conditions attached to this, because I think when we're looking at scale and material plan considerations other than the highways, I don't think there are any, and I think the highways, we've got the potential to condition and the potential to have a look at this in a bit more detail if we give it a bit more time, and I think it's a good scheme, so I'm in favour of it.
And if I add to that deferral then about actually seeing that it's a bit of a weird one, that's our land that we look into. I know we have access to the quite actually something that we haven't looked about who owns that land, seeing that we have access to the land registry, and actually clarify who that is to go with it, because again, as I stated before, we've been told before, you know, I don't think that they haven't put a junction in, have they, to actually say that's what they're going to do, which is probably the issue. But we've been told before not to consider who owns the land. It's an application, and that's a legal issue at the end of it. But so, Councillor Russell.
If I could just come back also, I welcome the response from KCC Highways, but I did think that they didn't really respond unless it was 10 houses plus. Yeah. So I'm quite frankly amazed to see that they provided a response on what looks to be a very, small scale operation. So.
Councillor Harwood, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, thank you. Some alarm bells were set ringing in that discussion which just took place around, what is the land ownership, and is there an ability to create the vision displays that are required by the Highway Authority? Because if you did create the vision displays that we're talking about, that is an area with oak trees and lots of thick hawthorn, and that's a different application. You know, if you are removing oak trees and hawthorn hedges, that is proper surveys of dormice. That's going to be, you know, the great crested newts are only going to the pond to spawn. The rest of the time, they're probably in those trees, in the undergrowth under them. So it starts to bring in different things around ecology. It starts to bring in different things around landscape impact. So I think, you know, as I say, I'm staying out of this because I think we should just refuse it. But if you are going to defer, I think what you're deferring for is really, really important. Is it to achieve an access which gains the approval of the Highway Authority, or is it's just about conditions for the site and we manage it and then we just use the access which the Highway Authority has said is dangerous?
Yeah, okay, Councillor Harwood. So I think we've clarified that actually from Councillor Russell actually did say about looking at the traffic management to go with it. So if the officer could be with the deferral, look at the traffic management system, possibly that could be implemented, whether that is restricted access by marshalled use and all the rest of it to go with it possibly, or even if it's like as you exit a left-hand turn, which I know display to the one side, but I think that brings in different timing issues because you're not looking both ways. So if that could all be investigated, I think that'd be what we kind of require to go with it and look into the land ownership. Because if you're talking with that timing, you may actually have to reduce a little bit of that vegetation to get your sign time. Okay. So I have a proposal for deferral. I have a second for deferral. No, I said I have a proposal and I have a seconder. But I like the enthusiasm. So, okay. So, yeah. So all those in favour of deferral? That's 10 for 4. Those against? 1 against. Those abstaining? And 1 abstaining. Okay, that's deferred. Okay, moving on then. So, yeah. So we have no speakers on this one. Unless anyone wants to see it introduced, we can go for a start item. Start item. Okay. So I'll propose from the chair. Thank you. All in favour? Okay, and that is approved. Okay. The next thing we have is the appeals list to go through. And I'll go to Tony.
Yeah, no real comment really. We've introduced the summary in terms of this this time around, so hopefully they're helpful. The application about the day room, number 2 on the list, was a kind of bad result for us in terms of a large gypsum covered day room. We compared it to a small house, but the inspector didn't really go with that, and that was allowed. Yeah, and number 5 was the one that this was actually discussed here, and that was considered at a hearing. And yeah, the summary talks about the visual visual appearance of the building and landscaping.
Okay, any questions on the appeals list? So, Councillor Summerskill. Councillor Thompson, while I'm waiting.
I would simply like to register my gratitude to officers because these papers got longer, I think, because of my pestering, and I'm grateful to see this information. Thank you.
I think there's any questions. In that case, I should bring the meeting to a close. Thank you. Thank you for your debate tonight, councillors.